And he's like, nope. He's like, I'm always substituting for Roberta. You can go home or whatever. He's like, well, I'll never work here again.
Welcome to Recotopia, a happy home for recommended movies, shows, and music from two people you can definitely trust. Trustability varies by region, no guarantees implied. Now, here are your hosts, Chris Atkinson and Jeremy Scott.
Gentlemen, what seems to be the problem?
Bicycle accident. Fractured tibia about 5 inches below patella.
Dr. Harris,
Yes?
do you concur
Concur with what, sir?
with what Dr. Ashland just said? Do you concur?
Hello, everybody.
Hey!
How is it going out there today? It's Recotopia episode 45.
Mm-hmm.
I'm Chris Atkinson.
And I'm Jeremy Scott.
And once again, welcome all of you who are coming to listen to us live and watch us live.
Mm-hmm.
This time on a Monday and not a Tuesday. But usually it's Tuesday, but today Monday. But anyway, thank you guys for coming out to listen to us. Jeremy, how you doing today?
Man, I'm doing well, except for the butt-ass freezing cold temperatures outside.
Right. I mean, and we here in Tennessee don't even have it as bad as other more northern states do, but
This is true.
it still sucks when it sucks when it goes to the 20s here. It sucks where our skin is not ready for it. It's not, it wasn't made for it. So
No, we don't do it.
Yeah. Anyway, do you have any small recommends for us today?
It's no big deal.
Itty bitty living space.
It's so small and light.
It's small, it's tiny, it's petite, it's wee.
I'm so excited about the small recommends. I've told you several times now that with my brother's kid going to college in this area, I get to see my brother a whole lot more. And when my brother and I get together, we do movies. We watch movies. And this time was a quick pickup for Christmas break, so we only had one movie. And my brother and my wife and I watched Guillermo del Toro's Pinnochio.
Ooh, okay.
Historically, del Toro is hit or miss for me. When he hits, he really hits, like Nightmare Alley. I don't really need to talk about the misses, but this is a hit. I would say I fell just shy of loving this. I think Ewan McGregor is a standout voice he plays the cricket. But David Bradley is the guy that steals the show. He plays Geppetto. This is the guy as Walder Frey on Game of Thrones, or the caretaker guy in Harry Potter.
Yeah,
and he is wonderful as Geppetto in this. Stripping away all the Disneyfication of this story really makes the story sing. We recently went through the original to make a video, and I was struck by how freaking weird it is, and it's that classic Disney tripping balls kind of weird. But you strip all that away, and you get back to kind of the root of the story. And this movie spends a lot of time on his real son, Carlo, who he loses before he makes Pinocchio. This is a musical, and it takes balls to write new songs to go along with this story when there are beloved ass songs that go along with the story, and they do an amazing job. They're funny, they're whimsical. There's a kind of commonality amongst them, like in the sense that it feels like they're all part of the same album, if you will. At one point I turned to my wife and I said, what about Beer Donkey Island? There's no Beer Donkey Island in this version of Pinocchio. There is instead, actually, the movie sets these events in fascist Italy. And again, I think that really boosts the story's messages and themes. I liked it a ton. I don't know if I loved it, but it has stayed with me for days, and I give it 2 thumbs up. It's on Netflix, and you can watch it. And I suggest Okay.
I don't know when I'll get around to this. I don't know. I tend to, if a movie's been made a million times, I'd have a hard time, even if it's like wonderfully lush and new retelling of the classic story. I'm just like, okay, I guess I'll watch that one day when, way off into the future somewhere probably. But if you're going to recommend it today, I may bump it up the list a little bit. So
it's, I will say, and I should have said, from a visual standpoint, it's the most stunning piece of stop motion animation I've ever seen.
Yeah.
And that is worth watching alone. I think I said to my brother afterwards, the animation is so much better here than in something like Nightmare Before Christmas. But Nightmare Before Christmas grabs my heart in a way that this one didn't quite get full control of. So
yeah. Okay. All right. All right. So I've watched like a million movies in the past week. And then there's like a couple that I'm like, these are pretty good. I don't know if I want to recommend them. There's a lot of that going on right now, or movies that I think might be great, but like they might have a lot of problematic stuff in them nowadays. It's kind of like, oh God, do I recommend this? Because I don't know. I'm not opposed to watching these movies with things like that in them. So I watched the entire Dirty Harry franchise for the over the weekend.
Wow.
This past week. And these movies, now I'm recommending Dirty Harry, the first one here, 1971, but I would actually recommend all 5 of them. Just because they're fascinating movies to watch. There's something about now. I don't think there's any coincidence that all 5 of these movies came out during Republican president regimes. The first 3 came out during Nixon, and the last 2 came out during Reagan. And the first one is pretty much a sort of a straightforward kind of serial killer story, except it's a guy who's like a sniper, and he calls himself Scorpio, and he's killing people, and he's leaving messages and clues and notes and stuff like that. And he says, I will kill somebody again if you don't give me $100,000, which in 1971 was like $1 billion, I think. But the movies are set in San Francisco, and there is no doubt why these movies are set in San Francisco when you watch them, because San Francisco is the biggest liberal city known to man, right? So Harry Callahan is a guy who likes to get results, right? We see in The Simpsons, they spoofed this when they made the McGarnagle thing back in the day. These movies are set in San Francisco so that Harry Callahan, guy who wants to get results, and all you should care about are the results. You shouldn't have to deal with the politics and the like trying, these movies believe that every criminal that gets into the San Francisco court system gets off easy for some reason. Like that's the kind of movies these are. Like every single time they're like, oh man, we had that guy dead to rights, and then we made a few cop errors, like we didn't read that guy his rights, and we violated all sorts of other things. We knew he was guilty though, but they let him off on that technicality. And you're like, yeah, of course you did. Of course you let him off. So yeah, the first one has the famous did I shoot, I know what you're thinking, did I shoot 5 of my bullets or 6? And this is the 44 Magnum. It's most powerful handgun in the world. It'll blow your head clean off. And the question is, do I feel lucky, punk? All of that, and then they try to top it. It seems like with each successive movie, that each one of these movies, it feels like has some sort of famous line in it. But it's fascinating to me to watch these because of the politics of them, where they believe that criminals are just out there openly doing criminal shit in front of cops constantly in these movies. Like that's the kind of world they live in. And when Harry shoots that guy out in the middle of the street, it's like, oh, why didn't you read him his rights? And it's like, or why didn't you go through the court system? Because he's going to be let out anyway. he's a complex character. I think it's really interesting to watch it because a lot of times he has racist tendencies and he has sexist tendencies, but he does seem to like give everybody a benefit of the doubt a lot of the time. Of course, they always give him a partner in each one of these movies. It's always a minority or it's a woman, and he has to deal with that. Oh, how is Harry Callahan going to deal with having a minority as a partner? Oh no, what's going to happen? And it just seems like he's basically decent to those people, even though he gives them a lot of shit. Anyway, these are fun movies that you can't deny their influence over all sorts of movies that came later, especially like Lethal Weapon and things like that. I think they are worth a watch. The politics are very strange and hilarious to me a lot of times. Like they're right-wing versions of what liberals are. Like that's what the liberals are in these movies. So it's a lot of that. Like, oh yeah, it's that liberal judge who it's I don't know. They're fun to watch. They're fun.
Interesting.
To watch.
Interesting. All right. Well, my second small recommend, I'm bringing back a food recommend. I'm bringing you a recipe. I've made it 3 times now, each time to great success, and I've perfected it now. And it's my fried bologna sandwich. I hate bologna in its original form, in its true form that most kids eat growing up, bologna sandwiches. My brother loved them. I hated bologna. Hated. But my dad sometimes, when mom was gone, would fry bologna. And I always thought he cut little edges around the outside so that they would crisp up more and make it a little crunchy. But it's actually, you do that so that the bologna doesn't get air into it and curl. So I have not had bologna or fried bologna since I was a kid, but I remember that Dad's fried bologna tasted more like bacon than it did bologna. There's this restaurant near me that serves fried bologna sandwiches only on Wednesdays. And I never managed to be there on Wednesday, but everybody raved about these bologna sandwiches, and then that place closed. So I set about 2 weeks ago to make my own fried bologna sandwich. And this is what I do. You got 2 pieces of fried bologna. Make sure you get them good and crispy. After they're both good and crispy, you stack one on the other in the frying pan. You throw a slice of white American cheese on there. Now, white American cheese is not identical in flavor to yellow American cheese. Don't be fooled. There's different fat content. There's different saltiness. Then, over in this other pan, you've got a fried egg. And if you want it a little runny, go for it, honey. If you want it solid, fried hard, that's fine too.
Oh,
then
fuck
you plop
you're
that
gonna have
egg
it
on
runny.
there. Now, here's the thing that I think makes the sandwich is that I found these French bread hamburger rolls at Publix. And you and I both had that Rotier's burger that Bobby Flay raved about, was a burger on French bread, right? So this is French bread, and I think that makes all the difference. I put the bread down in the pan, get it a little bit crisped up in that bologna juice. I've already slathered a little bit of mayonnaise on that bun, and then one swipe of mustard. Pile it all together, and that is, I'm telling you, that's freaking heaven. I can't make it frequently because listen, fried bologna and eggs, not very good for you. But
coming from someone who doesn't like bologna, this still sounds delicious.
it will blow your mind.
Yeah. I mean, when you're doing all the things that you're doing with that bologna, like I can't just, can you pull out bologna out of like a regular package and just start eating it?
Personally, no, but you can. Yes, it's totally fine.
No. I'm saying, do you? Can you do that? Is that a you thing? Because I couldn't possibly. Like that's not a thing for me. But like, yeah, the idea that you could like cook it and put eggs on it and all that.
I'm telling you, man. If you're ever out anywhere and you see a fried egg sandwich on the menu, if you're not up to making this yourself, give it a shot because it's not like bologna. It's like bacon. It's like heaven.
Okay. Yeah, man, that sounds awesome. Randomly, I rewatched a movie that was sort of all the rage 15 years ago. I can't believe it's been this long. When I first watched it, I enjoyed it. And in fact, I'm probably even put it in my top 10 list of that year. But it was one of those that sort of felt like it had faded from memory for me. Like it wasn't nearly as funny as I remember and whatever. But 2007's Juno, I rewatched and And this is it is every bit as funny as I remember it being. That's that it's like even got moments that I forgot completely about in it. But um for those of you who don't know the story of Juno, this stars the now Elliot Page, at the time was Ellen Page. And she is pregnant but from her like her it's not her boyfriend, but it's her friend Michael Sarah. They started a little bit of a relationship beforehand, and they on one night they had sex. She got pregnant, and then of course the big decision comes down to the fact of like, okay, does she keep it, or does she get an abortion, or does she have the child and give it up for adoption? And she ends up wanting to give it up for adoption to this couple played by Jennifer Garner and Jason Bateman. And Jennifer Garner, this is probably the best performance you've ever seen Jennifer Garner. She was obviously became semi-famous for Alias just before this. But in her movie roles, I can't really pull out like one like great performance except for this one. She is someone who really wants to be a mom, could not conceive. And there's a really like heartbreaking kind of moment at the beginning where Juno's just kind of trying to be funny and everything, and she says something to the effect of, "Oh my God, you're so glad you're not in this condition," to her. And the camera, it cuts to Jennifer Garner, and she looks at her like, that hurts me into my core, but I'm not going to let you know that, and just sort of like looks at her like, okay, whatever. But it's, Juno is, I mean, she's just funny all the way through it. Just like a lot of like great lines all the way through. The little Rainn Wilson cameo that's in there. He's plays some like like a grocery store clerk or something like that. And just like says that's he's like, looks like you're gonna have a baby in the oven, little home skillet and all that type of stuff. Little like little Rainn Wilson isms and stuff like that. But great performances from Allison Janney, who plays Juno's stepmom. J.K. Simmons plays her father. Olivia Thirlby is her best friend. Of course, Michael Cera we already talked about. Jennifer Garner. Jason Bateman plays like, he literally plays sort of an Arrested Development kind of guy in this, where he's obviously not really into having a kid as much as his wife is. But Diablo Cody had a huge writing debut. I think this is Jason Reitman who directed it. It's just, I mean, it's tremendous. It's like, it's funny, and it's like touching towards the end. I was emotional at the end of this movie. The way everything resolves. And so, yeah, here we are 15 years later. I'm recommending Juno.
I watched this with my wife on video after it came out on home video the year it came out. We both really liked it. I'm not sure I've seen it since, but one of the biggest laughs I've ever gotten out of any movie was when J.K. Simmons says, "And I'm going to punch that Bleecker kid in the wiener next time I see him."
Yeah.
And that, between that and the goddamn time traveling robots, that gives J.K. Simmons like two of my favorite top 10 movie quotes of all time.
Yeah.
I need to go back to Juno. It's definitely one that I've waited too long to watch.
It felt like it was one of those movies just for that time. It was kind of a fad kind of thing. And there's a lot, Diablo Cody writes in this way of like lots of off the wall pop culture references all the way throughout, a lot of like very of the time kind of things. And I don't know, it held up for me on this one, even though it has that kind of vibe. And so anyway, there you go. All right, on to the big recommend.
I'm fine. It's just that you're so big.
It's so huge.
It's a good rule, but this is bigger than rules.
It's bigger on the inside.
Is it? I hadn't noticed.
The movie is Catch Me If You Can. Steven Spielberg, directing Leonardo DiCaprio and Tom Hanks. That's a big 1-2 punch right there.
Mm-hmm.
So DiCaprio plays Frank Abagnale Jr. They do this thing at the very beginning where he's on the To Tell the Truth program, and there's 3 guys who all claim to be Frank Abagnale Jr. and they go through a summary of exactly what this person did, and you have to figure out which one is telling the truth and which one is the liar, and so on and so forth. Basically, it starts off with just his family life at the beginning. His dad owns a store, and and he's being looked at by the IRS, and they're about to run into some money troubles, and they have basically, it looks like kind of an idyllic family life. It seems like his parents love each other and everything like that, but the money troubles are obviously starting to come home to roost. And there's even a point where Christopher Walken, who plays Frank Abagnale Sr., obviously, tries to sort of like con his way into into a bank loan near the beginning of this movie. And he is unsuccessful, no matter how suave he is or how suave he thinks he is. He is unsuccessful, and they have to sell a lot of things, including their house. And eventually this starts to leading to the breakdown of the marriage. Frank's mother starts cheating on her husband with Josh Brolin character, who is a friend of Christopher
James
Walken.
Brolin.
Yeah, James Brolin. I said
Shocked
Josh
for a second.
I said Josh, didn't I? It says James Brolin. So during this opening thing, did you get, I don't know if you got like some Road to Perdition vibes almost, even though like Frank Sr. isn't really going out to teach his son how to do these cons. He's obviously learning things about the system during this whole thing. And when they try to get that suit for him to go to get the bank loan and everything, he's trying to go to a store that is closing, and he does this trick where it's like, I just found this out in the street, and shows this like real pretty necklace with the heart on the end of it. It's like, it looks like what's the phrase he always uses? It looks like it just fits right around your neck or something.
Must have slipped right off your wrist.
Must have slipped off. Yeah. And so it somehow this works. This is an actual charm that works on people, works on women specifically, to get people what you want. So he learned some of this stuff, but like, yeah, this is, I think at first he's trying to go to school, and he's immediately bullied, but then he is mistaken for he starts to take over the substitute teacher's duties at a French class to basically get back at the bully, like, hey, you pushed the teacher on the way in. And so like it shows the actual substitute coming in, and she says, I thought that Roberta needed a substitute today. And he's like, nope. He's like, I'm always substituting for Roberta. You can go home or whatever. He's like, well, I'll never work here again. And the next scene, I love, this is one of my favorite lines of the movie, is the principal is talking to Frank's parents and says, for the past week, your son has been teaching the French class. And he's like, even set up a field trip to a French bread factory. Yeah, and I see in the comments people are saying this works. Yeah, I always wondered why the substitute didn't just go to the principal's office and say, you got somebody else to teach the class? And then they go and find that Frank is teaching the class, and they kick him out or whatever for doing so. At the very beginning, so but with all these money troubles, Frank starts trying to sort of invent a new life. And what I like about the movie right off the bat is he's not a great con man off the bat. They show him failing constantly at the beginning. And he's just basically, when he's doing all this, he's learning the system. He's learning what people accept and what people don't accept. And he's learning all the little details along the way. And one of the big details he learns is like how to cash a Pan Am check. That's like, that's like you can cash a personal check for $100. You can cash a payroll check for 300 or whatever. And so it becomes incumbent upon him to be able to forge these checks and be able to cash them for the max amount. And so he does a lot of like razzle dazzle with some checks that are like nearly perfect. And he is able to cash these things, and to a point where he's gotten to the point of $1.3 million is one amount that is heard. Tom Hanks, who plays Carl Hanratty, is it FBI? It's FBI.
Yeah.
He is an FBI agent who is working in this bank fraud division, and he is going through all of this bank fraud stuff, and it's obvious that he's not taken seriously, and his line of work is not taken seriously. In fact, the team that he's given, which is a very small team, one of the guys was sent there because he was being punished, and another guy was just doing stuff. He was just researching Supreme Court clerk applicants or something like that, and they send him as a guy. So the FBI doesn't really treat this bank fraud thing as a big deal, apparently. Like, they don't think it's worth their time. And I guess this is in the 60s. There's probably a lot of things they're looking into other than bank fraud. They don't think it's the biggest deal in the world. But yeah, Carl Hanratty at one point goes to see Frank's somewhat now estranged mother at this point, and she says something like, "I just got a job over at the bank or the Bible club or the church or something." I don't remember what it was.
I'm working part-time at the church now, I think she says.
Yeah. And he goes, "How much does he owe?" And Carl Hanratty turns around, he owes about $1.3 million.
And then he just closes the door.
Just closes the door. So basically this is like, he's just going through this, a lot of check forging stuff. At some point, he tries to get off of that, and he becomes a attending physician for like the graveyard shift at a hospital. And you see him, he trains on a lot of this stuff by just watching TV and movies. A lot of times. So he watches some sort of TV show with physicians on it so that he can kind of get some lingo down. But he totally fakes a resume to get this attending physician job, where he won't really ever actually have to be required to do anything other than, quote unquote, babysit a whole bunch of interns and nurses and things like that. And even the one moment where they believe that he's needed, he just goes out and has two guys play off of each other the whole time. They say, well, what happened to his leg? Well, this is what happened to his leg. And it's like, do you concur? And that's all he knows. Do you concur? And he goes, what do you mean? No, I concur. He said, well, yeah, the kid told us what happened. He's like, oh, okay. I said, well, do you concur? And the other guy's like, yeah, I concur. And he's like, okay, well, then it doesn't look like you need me at all. So you go ahead and do. And the guy like gives up a solution to the problems. Like, yeah, that sounds really good. All right, that's it. It doesn't seem like you need me here, so I'll move along. I don't know if you noticed this about this scene. He's obviously not happy to see all this blood and gore everywhere, right, in the hospital scene. Very reminiscent of how he acts in The Departed, when Jack Nicholson takes that hand out and starts, it's got that sort of like, I'm grossed out, but I can't show you that I'm grossed out because I see this all the time, and this is not so it's interesting that he's been in two scenes like that. When he's when he's a physician, he falls in love with Amy Adams, who's a nurse there. They actually have a relationship that blossoms. She thinks that he's Frank Connors, and and he gets to the point where he even meets the family out in New Orleans. Martin Sheen plays Amy Adams' dad. Um, and it's all sort of a run up to him asking Martin Sheen's permission to marry her and all that. And but at this point, this is where Carl Hanratty is almost on, like, has almost gotten to him, and he has to like come clean at the end, and it just keeps on going past that. He passes, there's a point where even during this Martin Sheen thing, he passes the bar in Louisiana. He's like a lawyer, but that is a really funny scene where he's does this whole thing, this whole ladies and gentlemen of the jury and all this, and then the judge is like, son, this is a pre-trial. There is no jury. There is no defendant. He's like, what the hell's wrong with you? And I love the look on DiCaprio's face. He never gives away at all that he's upset about this or anything. He's just sitting in that chair the whole time. There are, obviously we're getting to a point where Hanratty ends up finally corralling him and everything, and gets him to work for the FBI to find, to help him with bank fraud and everything like that. I am skipping over 100 million scenes, but I want to get your takes and and the scenes that you want to bring up on this.
I love, okay, so recently I saw a video that was going viral of these guys attempting to prove how willing humans are to look away. Mm-hmm. And so they just walked with this big ass ladder, wearing overalls and tool belts, into movie theaters, banks, office buildings, department stores, and no one ever stops them. No one ever questions them. They watched an entire movie and then walked out with the ladder. They didn't pay, nothing. Just people see two workmen with a ladder and they go, they're supposed to be here. Yep. I feel like that encapsulates Frank Abagnale, at least in this movie. I find a lot of the movie is fictionalized the more you dig into Frank Abagnale's real story, and there's even questions about his claims of some of these cons even being real, which I think would even be a bigger con if you convinced everybody you were the world's greatest con man, but you never pulled a con. But in this movie, he sees how much respect a pilot gets, and he realizes, he deduces, if I were a pilot or just looked the part, there would be fewer questions, fewer roadblocks. People are much more likely to just believe what I say. And he scams his way into a pilot's uniform, and he starts making those payroll checks you're talking about. And one of my favorite scenes is when he goes posing as a student reporter and interviews the head of Pan Am. To learn more. He's getting all this intel about how Pan Am works, and now you need this badge and these people get this access. And the dude just thinks he's a high school news reporter, so he's giving him all this stuff.
Yeah.
And then I love that the president says, I don't even know why people are asking me. He doesn't even fly Pan Am. He flies all the other airlines. So he's smart enough to use Pan Am as his cover, but not try and scam Pan Am.
Yeah,
there's just so many intelligent decisions he makes along the way, and the movie. I love that the movie gives us a reason. He has this father who is, intended or not, a bit of a con man. In reality, that's the exact opposite. The first person Frank Abagnale ever conned was his dad. But in the movie, it works perfectly to give us a reason why we should root for this kid as he goes about stealing $1.3 million. I love the scene where Hanratty actually does catch him in the apartment hotel. And there are so many red flags that Hanratty sees. And yet, by this point, Frank has learned that confidence really matters more than your uniform or, whatever job you're pretending to be. If you fake it enough, people will just buy it. And that's exactly what happens here. Hanratty is not a field agent. He is not trained to act on those kinds of instincts. And so Frank slips away at the very end, cleverly using his blind neighbor and a bit of, subterfuge. I love the relationship with him and Amy Adams. That actually feels legit to me. I believe those two characters actually love each other.
Yeah.
And I think that's why Martin Sheen's character believes it, because I think the love is real, even though Frank's persona is all fiction.
Yeah.
I was reading about one of the things that always grosses me out is that kiss between the two of them, where she just eats his face off.
Yeah.
And in the IMDb trivia, it said that to get that, Spielberg told her to pretend she had been starving to death and she was now eating a cheeseburger. So he sets up with her, okay, I haven't been on the level with you, but my love for you is real. Meet me in the Miami airport tomorrow at 11 a.m. or whatever day. And he goes there and he sees her standing there and he almost goes to her. He gets out of the car and then he sees a very obvious FBI agent walk behind her and whisper something to her. And he realizes, oh no, they got her to turn and I'm going to be arrested if I come in here. So does he give up? Does he go to another airport? No. He goes to a local university and recruits stewardesses in a fictionalized stewardess ambassador program and waltzes through the airport right in front of all the agents, hiding behind 8 beautiful stewardesses. The movie glosses over a lot. Like, where did he get those uniforms? Once he uses them to get to the plane, what happens to them? Do they not immediately go to Pan Am people and say, hey, we're supposed to be flight attendants for the ambassador program, but Pilot Frank just got on a plane without us? But I don't really care because there is a cat and mouse element to this movie. And Hanratty basically catches him 3 times. He catches him in that apartment. He catches him at the wedding where he barely slips away. And then he catches him in France. And just the juxtaposition of these two characters, I think really works. They don't spend much screen time together, but they're acting together. A lot of the phone calls, Christmas Eve phone calls and things like that. But just, he becomes obsessed with proving that bank fraud is a big deal. And to do that, he's going to catch this guy, this whale who's doing it. And they end up basically forging a relationship that betters both of them by the end. I also wonder why Martin Sheen doesn't hear from the judge about that scene you talked about. Where there is no jury, there is no defendant. I feel like in real life that judge is calling Martin Sheen going, just what the hell is your son-in-law doing or your future son-in-law doing? But I just love how... Go ahead.
No,
I just love how he shifts and waltzes from one prestigious occupation that gains respect to another. He goes pilot, then he goes doctor, then he goes lawyer, and all he's really doing is selling confidence. And I think there are people today who get by on life by just faking a little confidence that they don't have until later when they get it after they've, I don't know, been doing it for a while. But man, watching this for this podcast bumped this movie even further up my Spielberg list. I think it's in the top 5 for me of his all time. It's almost flawless. Tone, the music, the acting performances, the script, the dialogue, the length, it's just all singing. He's an orchestra and conductor and the musicians are all in tune.
2 hours and 20 minutes and didn't feel like it.
No.
Never once does it feel like it because there isn't any scenes that just kind of like super drag on or anything. A couple other scenes that I wanted to mention: Jennifer Garner making another appearance in this podcast has a scene as a model that everybody knows, but apparently isn't above selling herself for sex either. And there's a point where she's like, if you saw me down in the gift shop, how much would you pay for me? And Frank starts naming off numbers like 300 and 500. They end up on 1,000. And he finds another opportunity to scam someone in a split second. And he's like, I'm going to have to go down and cash one of these checks. And he's like, all I've got is this $1,400 check. And she's like, are they going to cash a check at this time of night and everything? And he's like, well, yeah, I mean, they're going to. It's like, but she ends up convincing him to give her the check and then saying, well, we agreed on $1,000. So I don't want to give you a $1,400 check. And then she gives him $400, which is $400 free dollars. And he gets to have sex with Jennifer Garner.
Yeah. Because that money came out of nowhere, out of the ether for that check. And am I wrong for thinking that, and maybe this is the point. Am I wrong for thinking that's an extremely overpriced experience in the 60s? Like, $1,000?
I don't know, for a model who's known, who's on covers, magazine covers.
I guess I always forget that part, but
I don't know. I don't know. I didn't solicit sex back in the 60s, Jeremy. I don't know.
Only recently have you started.
Can only tell you the modern price for that. The other thing I like, I don't know, this was a simple scene, but Martin Sheen is telling Frank that, you came here to ask my daughter's hand in marriage and everything, and you're here to get my permission. And DiCaprio sort of evades that question, but Martin Sheen keeps saying, go ahead, ask me the question, because he really wants to be asked. That's what's such a funny thing about that scene to me. He really wants to be asked. Like, this is the biggest honor of his life, to have someone asked for his daughter's hand in marriage, and he's just like soaking it in and everything. I love the scene too where he's in school and the girl is trying to give that doctor's excuse or whatever and he's like you're gonna have to fold it, and she's like, what? He's like, well, when your mom, he's like, that's a fake, right? He's like, your mom, when she gives you a note at the beginning of the day, you fold it. There's a crease in the middle. And then she's kind of like, looks at him, gives this little smile, and then decides to give it a nice little fold. And but no, that's the thing. Nobody in that office is probably going to look at it and go, oh, there's no crease in the middle. But that's the attention to detail that he has gotten to this point. And like figuring out these little nuances that get you there. I love too that he goes to that bank and he tries to do that what his dad did, and like that whole, like, it must have slipped off your wrist or whatever, and he tries to do all that charming type of thing. And the bank manager guy comes over and says, who are you? Why are you here? And then later on, when he's a pilot, the guy looks like, oh no, he ran into the guy again. The guy's going to catch him because he knew from last time. And the guy's like, glad to have your business here, son, or whatever. Yeah. He doesn't even remember that dude tried to scam him earlier. And now, because he's a pilot,
all he sees is the uniform. Yeah.
Which is another weird thing to me to think about, pilots being this kind of rarefied celebrity air where people wanted their signatures and stuff like that.
This was, it makes sense for the era, just because I think, I remember from Mad Men talking a little bit about airline passenger travel, that in the 50s and 60s it really exploded, and it was this new thing, and so who are these wizards that fly these hunks of metal? And it kind of makes sense, but that's not the case anymore at all. I feel bad for
him. So yes, catch me if you can. This is the big recommend. I hope everybody enjoyed it. And we haven't even, I don't think we even touched, I think every scene in this movie, nearly, you could have some discussion about it and everything. And we've probably missed a few that I'd love to talk about, but it's time to talk about the big secret double feature.
Be very, very quiet.
Secret? What secret?
Our dirty little secret.
I tell you something I've never told anyone.
Double feature. Well, I nearly went Thomas Crown Affair, but you have already double featured or small recommended that. And we're going to big recommend that eventually anyway, because it's McTiernan. I think that would have been a good fit. I hovered over Hannah for quite a while, only because of the bad father teaches kid how to do their trade, then kid goes off on his own and is being hunted by cops. But the tone didn't fit. And the tone doesn't have to fit for a double feature. You could do a horror and a comedy if there's enough in common. But I feel like this one is all about tone. And as much as I want to change it, because Josh Zero in the chat already said it. I'm not going to do it. It's Matchstick Men.
Yeah.
With Nicolas Cage, and it's Ridley Scott. And there is a con man who has done frequent cons. There is a child who is learning how to do the cons from dad. And I just feel like the drama comedy balance of this movie, and then the themes themselves about identity and who are we and what do we pass on to our kids, whether we mean to or not. I feel like Matchstick Men and Catch Me If You Can would be an excellent double feature.
Yes, it would. I ain't actually thought about Matchstick Men for something else recently we just did too. But I think Matchstick Men is on my list of possible big recommends down the line.
As it should be, man. It's fantastic, and it's one that I think a lot of people missed. So
yeah, absolutely. All right, that's an excellent choice. All right, so now, what is everybody's homework for next week?
All right, so I'm going to give you a homework, and then I'm going to give you a Christmas present, because your homework is the film Talk Radio from 1988. This is an Oliver Stone film starring Eric Bogosian, who also wrote the script with Oliver Stone. It is a drama about a fiery talk radio host. Clearly, at this point in time, I think riffing on what Howard Stern had become in terms of the shock jock persona, only going further with it to the point where this guy basically insults every single one of his callers. And he starts getting some threats. And you've got Alec Baldwin in here. You've got Michael Wincott, really young Michael Wincott.
Yeah.
And the Christmas present is coal at first, because this is not available for streaming anywhere. You're going to have to pay to rent this movie. And I have sat on this movie for 6 months waiting for it to show up on a streaming service to do on this show. I'm tired of waiting. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to Discord. And if you message me or tag me on Discord and you cannot afford to rent this movie, let's be good citizens to each other. I am going to buy and send you a $5 Amazon gift code so that you can rent this movie on Amazon, and that will be my Christmas present to you.
Nice.
So, Talk Radio, it's one of my very favorite movies that I discovered early in my love of film that nobody had ever told me anything about. I didn't know who Oliver Stone was when I saw this movie. And it's just great. It's just great. I can't wait to talk about it. I can't wait to see it again. Haven't seen it in 10, 15 years. Sounds like you've seen it before.
I saw it for the first time, and I think because of your recommendation back in the day, probably 4 or 5 years ago, I saw this for the first time, and it was one of the missing Oliver Stones that I had never seen. So, Eric Bogosian, there's a guy who is really is an interesting actor to me. I feel like I need to know more about Eric Bogosian. For some reason, I don't think he's just he's a writer, because he wrote Talk Radio. He wrote this, but I think he's a playwright, maybe, or he's his writing is his main thing, is what I believe Eric Bogosian does. And the first time I ever saw him, he was in that movie Gossip. Do you remember Gossip?
Yep.
He was the teacher in Gossip. So I was like, who is this dude, man? He's such a kind of like a likable asshole and everything. And he's like that in this too, although he kind of really goes super far as a radio DJ in this. But anyway, yeah, that'll be interesting. And speaking of which, I think there's one movie that I have on my list that you can't even stream. You can't even rent it. And it pisses me off because it's such a good movie. And I've got the Blu-ray. I found a Blu-ray of it.
Oh, wow.
And one day I will announce this movie and see if anybody can find it somewhere that they can watch it, because it deserves a Recotopia treatment. So,
all right. I'll keep hoping.
Yeah. Anyway, so
all right.
Are we gonna get a couple questions in?
Yeah, we've got a few minutes for questions.
Question.
I got something to say. I want the truth.
I am listening.
I want the truth. You can't handle the truth. This is good radio. Here we go. What is a welcome modern movie trend?
So I wrote something kind of based on what you said in our prep for this podcast. So I guess you go ahead and answer this question first, and then I will.
Okay.
Yeah.
I went, well, I only have Michael Giacchino score everything. Casting Jenna Ortega and Caitlin Dever and everything. Or putting specific people in charge of long-term creative visions for major properties, which has also come to pass now with DC.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, Giacchino is everywhere, and I have yet to tire of his music, and he sets apart each score in a way that tingles my earbuds. And so, yeah, that's a welcome movie trend, is him and Jenna Ortega showing up everywhere.
And we can tie Michael Giacchino back into Alias, which is where we first heard him, probably. And Jennifer Garner makes another appearance on the show.
Yeah.
Another appearance. And then we'll do Dude Where's My Car later somehow.
13 going on 30 we'll get to somewhere.
Yeah, 13 going on 30. Yeah, based on what you were saying there, like the stuff like Jenna Ortega and Caitlin Dever and these type of actors. It reminds me of that there's I don't know positively one way or another, but I think that's what we're getting more likable and more awesome actresses like this because of the Me Too movement that happened a few years ago. The industry it feels like it's safer than it was just 5 years ago. Maybe it's not. That could be a very naive thing that I'm saying there. So I'm not saying that, as a fact. But you've got to imagine that all of that went on a few years ago sort of started opening the door for like, hey, you know what? When I go into this business now, I don't feel like I'm going to be harassed or told to do something that I don't want to do and everything. So we're getting like these terrific, likable actors like Jenna Ortega and Caitlin Dever. So that's sort of what I think is trending in that for that. So that's what I came up with on that. I think that's what, it could be completely, I could be completely wrong, but that's what seems to be the trend. So
yeah, I see some good responses over here in the chat. Jets Mets says overhead drone shots. I agree. There's an overhead drone shot in Prey when they're doing their Jurassic Park homage, where it's chasing her through the long grass. And then I remember, I think it was the second season of Fargo on TV, has a chase of a group of people chasing one man in a snowy woods that is shot like 300 feet above with a drone. And I'd never seen anything like that on television. And I think as much as we're getting overuse of drone establishing shots in documentaries, I think we're finding, as Michael Bay proved with Ambulance, we're finding movies are starting to make really interesting use of drone footage. So I agree. And then Nolan says long shots. I think he means one takes or seeming one takes. And I do feel like those are on the rise over the last 5 to 10 years. And I do think that's good as long as there's a reason for it. Like the one shot episode of The Bear that puts you literally in the middle of the anxiety of working in that kitchen in that moment. 1917 is another entire movie that is cut together to look like one single take. Let's see if we got any that are good. Less studio interference with big name directors like James Gunn and Jordan Peele. I think that is probably a trend. Ambulance. Some people don't like the drone footage in Ambulance, so I guess
I think it might be the best part of the movie.
I liked it. Yeah,
I kind of liked it myself.
That and Jake Gyllenhaal's performance, man, because he is all in. Let's do another
all right.
TV question. What are your top 5 TV series, U.S. definition, not UK? Thank you. Finales of all time.
I think we're going to have some overlap here, but sorry to steal your thunder, but Breaking Bad has a great finale. Sopranos, call me a huge fan of that cut to black.
Me too. God.
Huge fan. The Good Place had a great finale. Cheers had a great finale. One of those one of those very emotional, like, well, we're just closing up the bar type of endings. I just really, really enjoyed that. And Futurama had a fantastic series finale, which of course they're rebooting the show, so maybe all of that's moot. I don't know. Anyway, the series finale Futurama was good, so those are my top 5.
It's I like the finale of Frasier a great deal. I realize I like Frasier more than most, and that episode isn't the fullest of laughs, but the way it ties everything together and sort of says, okay, Frasier's going to leave Seattle and go on a new adventure to a new city. And, we don't know what that's going to be until now in 2023. We're going to find out because he's can't read love.
Yeah.
But I really like the finale of Frasier. Unlike Friends, where the finale was just like, let's do whatever we can for 20 minutes and get Ross and Rachel back together.
Yeah.
I love the Sopranos, like you said, Breaking Bad, Dick Van Dyke Show, The Wire, I think had a pretty good finale. Yeah, and I see people saying MASH, obviously one of the most famous and
MASH has that tremendous, like he's flying up in the helicopter and they've spelt out that like goodbye or whatever so that he can see it from the air and everything. It's a really fun. It's a really
still tremendous watch finale.
Think so because TV. Remember, TV was such a different animal back in the day.
Yeah, you had like 3 channels then.
All people had to do at that point. By the way, people are asking like which Futurama finale and was it who got it? Finn got it. It's the one where Leela and Fry are old and they're together. Yeah. and they're together at the end. So yeah, I forgot that Futurama ended several times. But that last one before we start getting all the reboot episodes, I think is the one. So
yeah, the Buffy the Vampire Slayer finale is really good. I agree. Seeing Saint Almost Fire, is that a show? You mean Saint Elsewhere? Somebody else said Saint Elsewhere.
Yeah, Saint Elsewhere.
Saint Almost Fire, I think is a movie.
Well, and Newhart has a good one too. That one's a lot
Waking
of fun.
Up in Another Sitcom.
Yep.
Better Call Saul. Lots of good stuff.
Did you finished Better Call Saul, right? You ended up watching. Yeah. Oh, okay. I wasn't a big, huge fan of that finale. I don't know. Maybe I wasn't in the right place.
No, I'm kind of the same way. But I've always been on the edge about that show. Like I just, it's one of the most high quality, unnecessary pieces of entertainment ever made. Most of the quality that it contains is utterly dependent on Breaking Bad to the point where it just became a cavalcade of Breaking Bad characters. I feel like waiting for the Jesse and Walt cameo completely undermined a lot of the narrative of this season. So
and also the Bob Odenkirk stuff got so good with him and Kim.
Yeah,
they didn't need it. They didn't need the Breaking Bad stuff. I like the Breaking Bad stuff, though. I mean, I agree with you in some part, but I guess they didn't have enough show for it to just be Saul all the way through it. They had to find a way to make it Breaking Bad all over again. Anyway, I know why people like that Better Call Saul finale. I understand it. I didn't grab me like everybody else. And another problem too is that everybody was saying how great this finale was before I saw it. So it was built up way too much before I watched it.
All right. Well, I think we're probably gonna need to wrap it up there for today.
Okay. Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, the homework for next week is Talk Radio. We'll be back on the live end of it in Tuesday again next week. But Talk Radio, Oliver Stone, 1988, starring Eric Bogosian and Alec Baldwin and Michael Wincott. John C. McGinley, Jeremy says on Discord, if you want to see this movie, he'll give you an Amazon code to watch it. So
I'll do it.
So anyway, thank you guys out there in chat for coming out to watch us today and listen to us. Thanks to all of our listeners who come in. That's going to be it for this one. We'll see
you guys. Have a Merry Christmas.
Bye.
We'll see you on the other side.
Be Be a part of the live show by being a member of the Sin Club at Patreon at patreon.com/cinemasins. Chat with us on the Cinemasins Discord at discord.gg/cinemasins or Cinemasins Twitter at Cinemasins, and email any comments or questions to Recotopia at cinemasins.com. That's RECOTOPIA at cinemasins.com.
Ultrasound buddies. One of my biggest laughs from Friends was just on an episode where Ross hasn't had sex in 6 months, and Joey has all the sex. So Ross comes to talk to Joey, and he says, "Hey, I kind of want to talk to you about something really uncomfortable. Is that okay?" And Joey stands up and he goes, "Sure. How about you showering with your mom?" And after everybody laughs, Ross goes, "I actually had a topic in mind." I don't know why, but lately I've been spending time thinking about what are my favorite individual biggest laughs from my favorite sitcoms. Like, I know on Friends, it's the episode I told you about before where Joey uses silly putty to make it look like he's not circumcised at an audition. And then the silly putty falls between his legs. And I think on Seinfeld, it's when George produces the golf ball from the episode with the whale and the where Kramer hit the golf ball into the whale's blowhole.
Oh.
I always doubt myself. I keep thinking there's something I'm not remembering. There's a bigger laugh somewhere I'm not remembering.
Yeah.
And it's also a futile waste of my time, but I enjoy doing it.
Yeah. Yeah.
I enjoy trying to figure out what is the absolute high mark of this show that I love. 'Cause I can tell you some of the low points of all of these shows.
Yeah. I think, I don't know, and I'd be the same way if I were to go through these shows, but Seinfeld, for me, I think was the big JFK second spitter thing was probably one of the funniest things for me, because it was just, it's a perfect JFK spoof.
It really is.
And it's got fucking Wayne Knight, who's in the movie, doing a scene out of JFK. I think it's just they did that again. They did that with Basic Instinct as well, because he's also in that movie.
Oh, interesting. You're right. You're right. They did,
because there's it's the whatever, the one where they're questioning Jerry about something. Jerry's like very cool about everything, and
it's the mail fraud.
Yeah, and Newman is like, "It's very hot in here, isn't it? Real hot." And he's like, "I actually feel quite comfortable."
Did you watch any of that World Cup final?
Yeah, I watched all the final. I didn't watch after the U.S. got knocked out. I didn't watch any of the other games leading up to the final, and then I watched the final.
Yeah, I was kind of the same. I watched the U.S. games, and then I watched one or two other games. And then I just made sure to watch the final because I knew it was two of the best teams, and we had this whole Messi story, which turned out perfectly. I was watching this morning. The guy who announces soccer, who's famous for going, "Goal!"
Yeah.
He called that game for Telemundo, and he's Argentinian. And so one of the sports blogs I like has video of perspective on him in the stadium as he calls the. I'll find the link and send it to you. It's
so amazing. I'd love to see that.
Because he's a pro, but he lets a little bit of that joy come through.
It reminds. Well, I mean, it's not as emotional, but I do love seeing the camera shots of announcers during their big calls. They did that there was a couple of famous ones from women's college basketball Final Four a few years ago. I don't know if it was Kevin Harlan or I don't know who it was, but it was one of these things where it was like two games went down to the wire and they had the camera on the announcers and they were sitting there, all we hear is like the very professional, "This is the call" or whatever. But you see them, they're all like looking at each other and they're like grabbing on each other and stuff. And like,
awesome.
like, "Oh my God, did you see that finish? That's amazing." And I keep hearing that Tom Brady is just going to leave Tampa Bay at the end of this season and be with some other team next season playing at 46.
Yeah. I mean, honestly, obviously, if you put him in the right situation, He can win another Super Bowl.
Yeah.
And he had that the first year in Tampa, and you can't keep that together year over year. So if another team has everything except a QB, God, don't be the Colts. I don't think the Colts have everything except a QB, but
Yeah.
And the less said after this weekend about the Colts, the better. But I do think the Patriots ended up looking stupider than the Colts this weekend with that.
Oh, that was one of the
final play.
silliest plays ever.
Goofballs. It was goofballs. I was researching yesterday. This is how I waste my time. I was researching Leo because I had this hunch that he's worked with, produced 51, acted in 47. I had this hunch that he'd worked with more great directors than anyone. So I looked it up, and I realized after I got the list done, I was like, oh, I'm right. There's like 16 top-notch, amazing directors here. But then I went and did Brad Pitt, and it's the same thing. These A-list guys who really want to act, they make their way around. They work with Ridley Scott. They work with Spielberg. They work with Nolan. They work with Tarantino.
Yeah. There's there was, I think, I'm trying to think. Tom Cruise has a pretty good director list of his own. He doesn't have a Nolan on there, but like, it's like I know he worked with Scorsese. I know he worked with Francis Ford Coppola. I know he worked with Spielberg a couple of times. You know, then you have to go through like, you know, was it Tony Scott, Ron Howard, Brian De Palma.
Yeah,
it's a pretty good list, and I'm not even scratching the surface of how many great directors he's worked with. But yeah, I know he's got a lot of legendary ones there.
Everybody has their favorites too. Like Leo's worked with Scorsese, like I don't know 5 times.
Yeah, it's at least 5.
Yeah, so
like Gangs, Aviator, Departed,
the island of
Shutter Island.
Memories. Yeah, Shutter Island. Baz twice. Tarantino twice. Ridley Scott, Ed Zwick. Yeah. He's just making his way through all the best directors.
Yeah.
That's why he probably only makes one movie every 3 or 4 years at this point.
Yeah. He's got an Eastwood film, but it was not very good. J. Edgar.
No. It's not. I'm not really sold on in that movie. Like it's not that I think he's bad. It's just that I think everything about that movie missed the mark a little bit.
Yep.
And I don't like The Aviator, but I'd rather watch that than watch J. Edgar.